Good morning, Cardiff. I've always wanted to say that, so I feel quite happy now. We've got, as I just said, a presentation today to talk about the journey of changing a culture. We've got in this, as you'll see, a very familiar tool. It's a user journey tool, so we're not going to spend our presentation lecturing you about what one is. We know that you know that already. We'll touch on how it's used, but most importantly, we'll look at, as the title suggests, what that's meant to the team and also the organization. So my name's Rob. I work for Nokia. I work as part of consumer intelligence, which, without going into too much detail, basically is part of marketing in Nokia. I work to always bring the voice of the consumer to research projects, and in particular, I work with a part of the company called HERE. And as you'll see later on, HERE is basically formerly known as Nokia Maps. It's their location part of the business. So that's my role. So in this project, as it was a collaborative project, you'll hear that word a lot today, I was the client.
And I'm Kathryn. I'm head of service design at Seren. Just coincidentally, the Welsh word for star, so it's quite apt being back in Wales. But we're actually based in London, and we're a consumer experience and service design agency. And our focus is on research and understanding user needs to inform the design process of experiences, services, and then the measuring of it afterwards. We've talked a lot about that in the last few days. So using measurement and analytics to quantify the experience that customers are actually having. So we're going to talk about the project that Rob and I worked on for over a year, I think. That it was the duration.
Yep.
So even though we're from different companies, we're actually here for the same reason, or here doing our jobs for the same reason. We're both interested in creating amazing experiences, making lives easier, and connecting people. And that's connecting people with other people, with places, with things, and thinking about us as users, and experiences that our friends, family, all consumers, all walks of life would actually want to have. But we know that technology alone can't actually achieve this. We know that it's incredibly important, but if we can send a man to the moon, technology, we can usually find something to be the solution. So it's got to start with the people, both inside an organization and outside. And it's the people within the business that are intrinsic to making change happen, as much as the people that we're directing the solutions and products for. So we're here to show you how that we've taken technology, but it's not been the primary focus of what we're doing, and how that looking at the different challenges, we've been able to change the culture of an organization.
So there's been a lot of talk both yesterday and also this morning about different almost theories, principles, findings, learnings, that type of thing. And as you'll see, hopefully, I think there's a lot that's familiar almost in this from kind of the real world example, I guess, that we've just been through in this project. So to give you a bit of background, every great presentation has numbers, as I'm sure you'll agree. So Nokia, as you know, is a global company. It's got around about 100,000 employees, that's spread over a number of different sites. Part of that 100,000 people, there's around 6,000 here employees, and that's again spread globally, but the key sites are Berlin and Boston. And within that 6,000 people, there's 6 key different business units, and they're basically the verticals that kind of make up the team. So if we just go back one, if we look at each individual person, if you walked outside now and you spoke to one user, we all know that they're massively complicated. Not just in terms of different contexts they go through, the different hats they're wearing throughout a day, everything that's going through their mind, these different types of things. So when designing location experiences, and that's what HERE does, it focuses on public transport apps, driving, navigation, Google Maps competitors, basically. You'll see that it's incredibly difficult. And then especially when you're dealing with it on this scale as well, when you've got 6,000 of those people just in the company alone, never mind the people that are actually using it. So, in summary, it's complicated. That's a bit of an understatement, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, a number of different teams working to a number of different products. And there's a number of pressures on them as well. So not only have we got a sales organization that's under the usual kind of sales pressures and targets, you've got different budget targets, you've got different stakeholders that want different things, competitors such as Google and others, launching products constantly and new features. It makes it a bit of a minefield to kind of navigate, really. Yesterday we had an invisible person. This time we've actually got a waxwork in the back of our photo. But, this kind of, I guess, started to potentially create a problem. And we've seen this in other companies, and we were nearly starting to see it within here, the location brand. And the problem is that because of all these different influences, because of the complexity, actually there's almost an easy solution that some people resort to, and that's actually thinking that they know their users well enough. And that's almost to kind of, in a sense, shortcut the innovation process sometimes. It's not done intentionally, it's just because of all these different pressures that they're under, because of the targets they need to meet. All of this, that basically they almost end up designing for themselves. And that was a problem that we were fast approaching, I think, within here, and that we were looking at. So this project was basically, was born from a need. The need was to understand real people and real context. It was to put that within a framework, to create a core and common language that we could all talk from. But that alone wasn't enough. It wasn't just about delivering a tool, and as we heard yesterday, it wasn't just about an output and delivering this polished user journey tool that they've never seen before, and it will completely change the business. In order to do it, a key thing that we were mandated with was about changing the culture. It was about making that culture be more receptive to talking about the user, and the user is in a person they've observed rather than themselves or what a friend of theirs does. And ultimately, this was so here could live up to its brand promise, and that was delivering maps for life. It's maps that can be used in their everyday situations, as we said, such as public transport, driving navigation, and street navigation.
So the word of the day, the word of the presentation is collaboration. So it was a collaboration between Seren, Nokia, and here, and across a number of different countries. We've actually got some people from here in the audience, which I promised I wouldn't say stand up and wave, but they are here. And the project was actually, it was a project about understanding the way that people navigated through environments, through cities. How do people get from A to B? How do people get to A to B when they're under pressure, when they need to be somewhere in a hurry? What does it look like in the morning as opposed to in the evening on the way home? It's the same journey. They might do it every day of the week, but every single time the context might be different. So using that as a basis, how do we gather that insight? How do we bring it in? How do we create a framework? So it was a bespoke tool. It was a user journey that we've talked about loads, and we've talked about toolkits, but it was a bespoke tool, and it had to be customized to the organization. It had to be relevant to the people that were using it. They had to own it. They had to take it forwards. They had to live with it and grow it. It did illustrate contextual triggers, and those were there so that the designers within Nokia, within here, were able to take points of reference that they could have some focus on and drive their design and their development forwards in bite-sized chunks. So rather than looking, how do I get around a city? How do I design a solution? How do I design an app? How do I design a product that solves all these complex problems? How do I break it down into bite-sized chunks so that I can address every individual need, join them all together, and come up with a solution that really, really is what the user's after, rather than being driven from the technology or the inside out. It was also there to avoid design paralysis. I don't know about anybody of you, but when you get so much information, so much research, sometimes you look and think, where do I start? What do I do with it? So this was to enable the designers to take little bits forwards and continue on the innovation process, continue on what they do best, without having to worry about some of the politics and some of the issues that stop them from actually doing the work.
One thing quickly to add on that was that it wasn't just, this was mainly about location, and Kathryn will explain in a second, but there was almost a commerce angle to this as well. It was all about not just the contextual triggers in what you would use in terms of your maps, but also when you'd be most likely and most receptive to adverts, to vouchers, to all these different types of things. So there was a real business angle to this as well. It wasn't just about UX, and it wasn't just about developing a brilliant UI that perfectly met your needs. It was about identifying those opportunities as well.
Yeah. So all the pictures that are going throughout the presentation are from the studies that we did and the work that we did and the people that we spoke to. So this is Polly here. And she's a university student up in Newcastle. And there are so many opportunities for her, or for brands as well, to interact with her that are just being missed because it's not understanding where those points are and not necessarily taking that insight into the organizations. So by providing this framework to to gather that insight by making it something that was living, that could evolve and move forwards. The developers, the designers, could make it much more relevant to her and harness those opportunities and monetize those points in time, those moments, and give Polly something that she wanted as well as something that the business would want, and also open up opportunities to third parties. So it needed to span the business, it needed to span the business objectives, it needed to span the different technologies, the different cultures, the different organizations, the different people, the different languages, because we're talking about 3 or 4 different languages within the organization as well. But it needed to focus on real people. So in summary, it provided a common language so that whether you were talking in German or in English, or whether you're from America or wherever it was, but also whether you're a designer, whether you're a technologist, whether you're a developer, whether you're a researcher, everybody had their own language. So it's providing, the framework was something that could provide a common language, a common point of reference, and a common goal that everybody could align their development to.
That picture of the North Star was sadly not from our research, but it's the only one. Basically, as I think we've already summarized, that timing was crucial to this. So not just developing this tool and getting it to such a point that we could actually ingrain it in the business. To do that, to embed it, the timing of it was crucial. And that's something that we worked on, and we worked closely with the HERE UX design team based in Berlin. And it was about understanding the key moments that we could collaboratively kind of involve them. There's that word again. But it was about understanding that if we launched it too early, then we weren't addressing a need at all. So it would just be dismissed and forgotten. If we launched it too late, we would miss the opportunity, and therefore it would be useless almost in a sense. So identifying those key points, making sure that the business was brought along, the stakeholders were brought along, was a key aspect. And that helped us ingrain it in the business, but importantly, horizontally. I mentioned at the beginning we've got these 6 kind of verticals, and I'm not going to go into an org chart here, but it was important that actually it worked across those. And the reason why we partnered with the team in Berlin, the HERE UX design team, was because they worked across all 6. So I sit in the global team, as I explained, and we kind of almost facilitated this, but on a day-to-day basis, it's now kind of, it lives with them. They own this, and we needed to kind of give it the best chance it could to drive it into those different areas. And those 6 verticals are important. This project wasn't about getting rid of those. They're 6 individual elements for a reason. They're working to different programs. They're working to their own milestones for the larger goal, but they needed to remain individual. So that's why it was important that it went across these different almost silos, but without kind of destroying those.
So intentionally, we're not showing you the journeys, as we said, but just a quick summary of what we actually did. So we reviewed over 100 presentations, so data that's already gathered about location and commerce, how people got around, what the problems were, how they did it, why they didn't do something, the barriers. And then looking at where the gaps were, when we went out to the market, we spoke to the users. So we spoke to people in London, Newcastle, Manchester, Hong Kong, Beijing, Shanghai. But we went there and we saw it for ourselves. And then we came back and we iterated it, or we iterated while we were out there, which I'll go into a little bit more in a moment. And then we went back out again and we did more studies. So it was growing, it was living. And it was developed in real time, and this was talked about yesterday. How do you use research in a way that, or how do you use design so things are happening in real time, so that you're not gathering data and then you do something with it, and that's it. It's doing something, developing it, putting it back in, taking it back out, iterative. And again, crucially, it was about the members from HERE coming along the journey with us, coming and seeing what was going on. People that wouldn't necessarily go out into field and see what people were actually saying firsthand, and then seeing how it's being used in the framework and the tool that they were going to be using, that they were going to be owning, that they were going to be growing. And it was a combination of using, again, something we talked about yesterday about big and little data. There were other huge studies that were going on. A huge amount of data is being produced about how people navigate around environments. Data that was being produced by Nokia, data that's being produced by HERE, data that's being produced by third parties. And then also the little data that we were collecting, stuff that we could get our heads around. And it was so important that we were marrying the two up and measuring different points, being able to prioritize where a team should develop a product or service first, so that we could report back to the business, or so that Nokia could report back to the business. It started looking at location commerce globally, whether people navigate go around by public transport, private transport, or in a car. And then we focused into one key team and public transport in particular. And by doing that, we were able to show how the initial theory and the insight that married against that initial theory could demonstrate impact, and how it was robust, how it was validated, how it had a grounding, and how it had a reality that could be taken forwards.
So that kind of pressure tested it in a way that proves that our kind of hypothesis, all our lovely thinking, our millions of post-it notes, all was working. It was starting to make sense. But, and this is obviously what the topic is, it's about, this is where the transformation started. So up until now, it was delivering exactly what we needed it to, what we expected it to almost. But actually, it's how the tool then evolved from them, which has been quite interesting, and how it's continuing to evolve. So not only is it being used for design stimulus, so it's capturing a user journey process rather than what the product could do, it's actually what users are doing, and then using that as a jumping off point, as Kathryn mentioned. So this is one such workshop we ran over in Boston. So it was looking at a key journey for someone, how we could design individual parts of that better, and then thinking about how to join it up. It also is being used to identify new use cases, ones that we have perhaps overlooked, how people use public transport that we may have missed in the past, but also capturing people's concepts of a use case as well. So when key members of teams have left and they've got this great concept in mind for how this product or platform could be used, it was the perfect kind of vehicle to grab that. We're also seeing that it's being used to generate concepts that are going into further testing. So some stuff we're doing in Chicago is all being developed from a user journey framework, this user journey framework, and it's being put now into a quantitative study. And finally, it's also being used as ready-made stimulus. So the project that Kathryn was just talking about, the public transport one, that was a year ago now. It was actually dug out like the other week by the guys in Berlin in the HERE team, when a designer came and wanted to understand the public transport use case a bit more. So rather than having to go right back to the drawing board or do a new study, new research, get out there again, it could be brought out. It's a ready-made almost inspiration that would need slight updating, but it's there. But the change went further than that. It wasn't just how the tool was changing and how it's evolving. That's great, and that's what we wanted and hoped would happen. It's most importantly how it started to change a team and a culture, and obviously that's hence our title. So this is Dorrit. She basically runs the HERE UX design team out in Berlin. And this is the workshop that we said in Boston that we were doing. And this is now what we're seeing is starting to tame the business. They're really driving this into different areas of the team and not putting users back at the heart of it. It's demonstrating their structured thinking. I'm not going to make the obvious joke about a German team having very clear and structured thoughts, but it demonstrates that design thinking very well. And ultimately, it's empowered them. Before, there was almost this tendency to perhaps overlook them, that they were the usability team. They just did that, they just did this. But by kind of giving them this tool and the user almost, that responsibility, they're now brought to the table a lot earlier on. Stakeholders want to know what the user point is, where they should kind of start from. So my point of view, and just as almost an outsider, I guess, even though I've been on this project, is that service design is changing here for the better. It's empowered them to that degree. And it's still evolving. It's not come this way and then that's it. It's going to still change. It is still living. So there's further steps it can go to, and a lot of this we touched on yesterday. So it can reach beyond design by combining it with bigger data. So props to Kerry again for that. But by attaching dollar values, by attaching percentages, all these figures that we've used to create the thing in the first place, that will give it more relevance with the business planners. And ultimately, it will help us to monetize these experiences. So we're all about creating great experiences, as we said at the beginning, but ultimately we also need to, as a business, earn some money off it. And this will help us and can identify how we do that.
So lessons learnt, there are many, but there are the 4 key ones that we want to talk about, or just highlight in summary. So don't rely on technology or a tool alone. It was so important to be able to get to where we got to and to start the process of changing an approach, changing an organization. But it wasn't the sole thing. It was definitely the people and the ownership and identifying who it was that could take it forwards and who would have the passion behind it and want to share and grow the actual tool.
The second one then is about embracing the business. Collaboratively, as we keep saying, is absolutely vital. Like, we needed to be took along the process with Seren, but also the guys within here needed to. They were the end users of this. There's no point in us just turning up and going, right, there you go, and not understanding the problems, the questions, all of this that they face. So to do this as early as possible was obviously crucial for us.
And identifying guardians within the organisation. So what made this work so well was that there were people within the business that really wanted to take it on, really wanted to own it, really wanted to share and evangelize about it. And that was both in here in Berlin, but also in London. And it was also the passion of Seren as well, to make sure that they were the people that could see the potential of it and as Rob said, not just deliver it, but take it forwards, because the life really started once it was handed over.
And finally, let people evolve it. It's almost an obvious point, but with people not being precious about this, with the here team not being precious about this as well, it's enabled it to change. As long as it's delivering the same thing, putting the users back at the heart of it, giving us that language, that common starting point, it's meeting its purpose. If it does it in a slightly different way, if it's used in a different context, a different workshop, filled in slightly differently, it doesn't matter. If it's achieving the same thing, then that's vital, and that's obviously what it's been allowed to do. So on that, those are our 4 kind of mantras. We're going to end. If there's any questions, obviously you can email us after, or we believe we've got some time now. So thank you.